one read, the black traps, right? Morning officers, the two questions yesterday were also from prelims 2021. The first one read, the black cotton soil of India has been formed due to weathering of. The options include brown forest soil, fissure volcanic rock, granite and schist, and shale and limestone. Now guys, this is a pretty simple question. It's a direct NCERT level question. Whenever we think of black cotton soil, what comes to our mind are Deccan traps, right? Deccan traps of Maharashtra, Gujarat region. So Deccan traps. And when we think about Deccan traps, what comes to our mind is the outpouring of lava and its solidification over millions of years. So lava is related directly to option B, fissure volcanic rock, and this is the best answer to this question. The other question was, with reference to recent developments regarding recombinant vector vaccines, consider the following statements. Genetic engineering is applied in the development of these vaccines. And the second statement is, bacteria and viruses are used as vectors. Now guys, if you think about this question, it is talking about recombinant vector vaccines. Okay, so this is a technology question. It is not a science question. It's a technology question. And as I've also told in the one-to-one sessions, there are two kinds of questions when it comes to science and tech. We have the general science questions and we have the technology questions. In general science, mostly knowledge is needed. These are standard fact questions generally. And in technology, we have, because we are talking about application of knowledge, application of science, and the applications can be infinite, right? Virtually infinite. So there is higher likelihood of application of technology, application of logic in technology questions. So if we think about the first statement, it says genetic engineering technology, right? Genetic engineering technology is applied in the development of these vaccines. Now, recombinant vector vaccines, there can be multiple kinds of these vaccines, and some of those kinds may involve use of genetic engineering, right? So just see the nature of the statement. It's a generic statement. It's a general statement. It is not talking very specifically about some particular kind of vaccine or some particular kind of some nuance of genetic engineering technology, right? If that were the case, then it could have been a deep fact, but here this is not a deep fact. It's a general statement. It's a wide statement, and if it is a wide statement, it has got a higher likelihood of being correct because the scope is wide. So recombinant vector vaccines, although we can't be sure about what all is covered under recombinant vector vaccines, so we can assume that there might be multiple kinds of vector vaccines, recombinant vector vaccines, and genetic engineering also is has got multiple dimensions. So there might be some dimension, even if we have one kind of vector vaccine that can be made by using one kind of genetic engineering technology, this statement will be correct, and the possibility of having this match is high. The probability is high. So the first statement is most likely correct. If we come to the second statement, it says bacteria and viruses are used as vectors. Again, there are thousands and maybe millions of species of bacteria and millions of species of viruses. If we have even one species of bacteria and viruses that can be used as vectors, this statement will be correct. And the probability of finding that one species amongst the list of millions is high. So the second statement also is most likely correct. And the best option, therefore, in this question is Charlie, both 1 and 2. Morning officers, the two questions yesterday were also from prelims 2021. The first question read, with reference to India, consider the following statements. Judicial custody means an accused is in the custody of the concerned magistrate, and such accused is locked up in the police station, not in jail. And the second statement was, during judicial custody, the police officer in charge is not allowed to interrogate the suspect without the approval of the court. Now guys, this was a completely random question, right? Just like the lemongrass question, the natural mosquito repellent question, or the filter feeder question, this was also a completely random question. The information asked in this question is not there in our standard books, not in the NCERT, not in the Lakshmikant. So this is a non-standard question, in fact a random question, as I've told you. Now if it is a random question, logic can be applied, and if we look at the first statement, it says judicial custody means it is in the accused is in the custody of the concerned magistrate. Yes, this part can be correct because magistrate means a judicial person. So judicial custody, this we can logically relate, right? Judicial custody means custody of the magistrate and not of the police, not police custody. It is judicial custody. And the second part of the statement says, such an accused is locked up in the police station, not in jail. This is a matter of law, right? Where that person will be locked up, for how many days can that person be locked up, what will be the conditions of locking that person up. All of these are part of the law, and that means it is deep fact. Who will know whether this person will be locked up in jail and not in police station, or locked up in police station and not in jail, or whatever be the other conditions. So it is a deep fact. Only the police officer will know, or the magistrate will know, because of their job, right? It is their job to implement this judicial custody, so they'll know it because of that. It's a specialist information. Deep fact when required for marking the answer is incorrect. So the first statement is incorrect. The second statement says, during judicial custody, the police officer is not allowed to interrogate the suspect without the approval of the court. Now the judicial custody, two kinds of custody we mentioned, right? Judicial custody and police custody. What is the meaning of these terms? What is the difference? So judicial custody means that the control, the command over the accused is in the hands of the judiciary, the court, and in the case of police custody, the control is in the hands of the police officer. So naturally, the difference between the two will be that in case of police custody, the police will have more power, but in case of judicial custody, the judiciary will have more power. So this statement is logically derivable, right? Although this statement seems to be deep fact, again, the police officer can interrogate or not. It seems to be deep fact, just like the previous statement. But please note, it is logically derivable. So this is a nuance of the deep fact that we have learned here. If it is deep fact, but if it is logically derivable from the information given in the question itself, we are not using any other specialist information, or even if we can use the standard information, the standard fact in deriving the what is given in the deep fact, then it will no longer be the deep fact which we use, which we mark as incorrect, right? So if it is logically derivable, then it can be correct. And as we have discussed, it is logically derivable. So the second statement seems to be correct. We don't have any problem with the second statement. And therefore, the best answer in this question is Bravo 2 only. The second question read, which one of the following in Indian polity is an essential feature? Essential feature that indicates that it is federal in character. It means Indian polity is federal in character. So again, guys, this is a standard fact question. It is given in your NCRTs as well, in your Lakshmikant as well. But if you look at the options, this will require you to think. Okay, it is not like it is directly given in your books. Even if it is directly given, these kind of questions can be done through plain common sense also, plain logic also. So you just need to know what is the meaning of being federal. Federal means center has got its own powers and responsibilities, and states have got their own powers and responsibilities. This distinction, this division means federal polity, right? If you can just start from this point, if you know this point, then you can answer this question. If you don't know this point, then this question cannot be answered. Don't hazard a guess unless you know what is the meaning of federalism or federal. Okay, so what will ensure that this distinction between center and state exists or continues to flourish? What essential feature? The question is essential feature. All of them may lead to federalism, but the question is asking you to identify the most essential, the most important feature. Okay, so independence of judiciary is safeguarded. Will it lead to federalism? Will it secure federalism? Yes, because if the judiciary is independent, then it can, it will not be influenced by the central government or the state government, and it can give its own opinions without any fear or favor, right? So this will ensure federalism, but whether it is the most essential, that we can't say unless we reject the other three options. The second option says union legislature, okay, that means the parliament has elected representatives from constituent units. So will having elected representatives lead to federalism? Union legislature is talking about both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha, yes, it leads to federalism, but the Lok Sabha, that is like the whole country is represented there. Lok Sabha is not for federalism. Rajya Sabha only is for federalism, because Rajya Sabha is the representation of states in the union legislature. So that can lead to federalism, but compared to alpha, this is a weaker statement. It is not an essential feature. I mean, it is not a stronger feature than alpha. Okay, the Charlie statement says, C statement says, union cabinet. This is talking about the cabinet itself. Okay, it is even more narrow than the Bravo statement. Union cabinet can have elected representatives from regional parties. Okay, yes, elected representatives in union cabinet can lead to federalism, because regional parties' aspirations will be there. Then in the cabinet, these aspirations will be met. But still, if we compare it with the alpha statement, the independence of judiciary statement, certainly alpha is stronger than the Charlie statement. Then you have fundamental rights are enforceable by courts of law. Now this is a completely unrelated statement to federalism, because fundamental rights do not have a bearing on federalism. Fundamental rights are for the individuals, for the citizens. Federalism is governance related, right? States do not have fundamental rights. States have got their own powers and duties and responsibilities which are given in the state list, but states don't have fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are only enjoyed by citizens, persons. So this delta option is unrelated to the question, so we eliminate it. And out of A, B and C, A is the strongest, so we go with it. Morning officers, the first question yesterday was from Prelims 2021. It read, with reference to India, consider the following statements. When a prisoner makes out a sufficient cause, parole cannot be denied to such a prisoner because it becomes a matter of his or her right. Now, if you think about this statement, it is such strongly worded. At the same time, it is such vaguely worded. Look at the phrase sufficient cause. What do you mean by sufficient cause? The second phrase, a matter of his or her right, right? It is not some kind of fundamental right that we are talking about here, that you must know that getting a parole becomes a matter of his or her right. So these are vaguely worded phrases. And when we are talking about laws, when we are talking about definitions, when we are talking about such specific things, vaguely worded options are generally incorrect. Okay, this is the reason number one why this statement is erroneous. Secondly, it says parole cannot be denied if sufficient cause is made, right? Firstly, there is no definition of sufficient cause in the statement, so anything can be said to be a sufficient cause. And if anything can be said to be a sufficient cause, then parole cannot be denied. There are so many situations, so many emergency situations that the law has to take care of. And if parole cannot be denied, such strong words are there, then it can wreak havoc in society. right? There can be wrong people on the streets if parole cannot be denied in any case, if sufficient cause is made, right? So this is a big judicial loophole or legal loophole if such a statement were correct. So this statement is most likely incorrect. Also, of course, the other classic reason is that if you look at this statement from deep fact angle, that also is an issue, because when someone makes a sufficient cause, parole cannot be denied. Who will know that parole cannot be denied, right? Here we applied this logic that if parole cannot be denied, then what about those emergency situations or urgent situations where parole has to be denied? This phrase is not taking care of that, and law does not work that way. Law tries to take care of all possible situations and be as clear as possible. So that is one way of thinking about it, but also the other way is of the deep fact, the classical way. Who will know that parole cannot be denied at any cost? Only some judicial officer or magistrate, judge, or these kind of people, police officer, these kind of people will know, right? So that becomes a deep fact, and deep fact when it is important for marking the answer. These kind of options, when we have one, only two, only both, one and two, and neither one nor two, these options require us to know of both the statements. So from that angle also, the statement is incorrect. So first is gone, alpha is gone, Charlie is gone. The second statement says state governments have their own prisoners release on parole rules. Now this can be correct because you have police as a state subject, right? Different states have got their own police, and the regulations differ from state to state. So jails, police, all of these come under states, and therefore this statement has a higher chance of being correct. It does not give you any information which is deep like the previous statement, or random, right? So random fact, deep fact thing will not work here. It's a simple statement. It says state governments have their own prisoners release on parole rules, or it is similar to saying state governments have their own police regulations, right? Because police, jails, parole, all of these things, they are interrelated, the same category. So this statement has a higher chance of being correct. So the best option in this question will be Bravo 2 only. The second question was very tricky. It read, which one of the following best defines the term state? The first option read, a community of persons permanently occupying a definite territory independent of external control and possessing an organized government. The second option read, a politically organized people of a definite territory and possessing an authority to govern them or govern themselves, maintain law and order, protect their natural rights, and safeguard their means of sustenance. The third option read, a number of persons who have been living in a definite territory for a very long time, having their own culture, tradition, and government, and a society permanently living in a definite territory with a central authority, an executive responsible to the central authority, and an independent judiciary. Now guys, this was a very, very tricky question, because if you look at the definitions that are given in the options, they are very close, almost similar to each other. And if you don't have conceptual clarity, or if you approach this question with a muddled mind, with an unclear mind, without a calm mind, you are very likely going to go wrong in this question. The first thing we need to note is that the question is asking about the definition of the word state. Okay, so definitions, what is the nature of definitions? They are like law. In the previous question we discussed law, right? Provisions of the law. They will be clear, they will be unambiguous, they will be crisp, right? They will not be subjective or not be casual, not have any casual words, right? So very, very clear these are. And also the term state, the Indian state, right? The Chinese state, the US state. So we're not talking about the individual state governments that we have, the states of India, but the state of India. Okay. Also, this word, if you replace by the word country, okay, how I approached this question was, if you replace this word state by the word country, you are going to make your life easier, because for all practical reasons, the word state and country are the same, right? So just think of a country. Instead of state, just think of the word country and read the options once again. A community of persons permanently occupying a definite territory, independent of external control and possessing an organized government. So three things are there. The first one talks about permanently occupying some definite territory. The second thing is independent of external control. So this is where the sovereignty part is coming. And the last part is possessing an organized government. So this is where the bureaucratic government is, hierarchical government is talked about. We have also seen, guys, that in such questions, it is often difficult to arrive at the right answer. So we try to find out the flaws in 3 out of 4 options. So whichever option has got any flaw, that will not be the answer. So what is left will be the answer. This often makes our life easier. So if we think about the first statement, can we identify any flaw in it? It says a community of persons permanently occupying. So permanently occupying. Do we have a country that does not have permanent occupation of a definite territory, right? Normally not. Normally countries, if you think about the world map, political map, normally the territories of countries are now settled, the borders are now settled. In most cases, somewhere, yes, the borders still keep on shifting. If you look at, for example, Israel, Palestine, initially Israel was very small, Palestine was large. Now it is the opposite. Israel has captured territory. Even other countries also, like Russia is doing now with Crimea. So extension of boundaries of state is a living organism by this angle. So extension of boundaries often happens. So it feels like this permanently occupying part is a problem permanently. Although if on the other hand we think that generally states have got permanent occupation of a definite territory. Like if we think about India, India has got this piece of land that comes to our mind when we think of India, right? When we think of Russia or USA, a particular piece of land comes to our mind. So permanently occupying seems to be correct also, but if we look at the extension of boundaries like Israel, Palestine, Russia, Crimea, it seems to be incorrect also. So let us just hold this option for a moment, right? We can't say it is correct, we can't say it is incorrect. Let us just hold it. The second feature is independent of external control. Yes, this is an important aspect. Sovereignty, we expect countries to be independent of external control. When we see the state of India, right, the government of India's orders will work in that territory, or the state of India's orders will work in that territory. So it has to be independent of external control. There is no country in the world which is independently a country, but at the same time it follows orders of some other government. Of course, if you look at the Cold War period where countries were divided between US and USSR, still there was influence, a huge deal of influence, and we can say that for practical matters even that they were not independent in complete sense, but still when we look at the formal definition of independence, still those countries were unique in themselves, right? Russia's flag was not flying in those countries. Russian government orders were not being implemented in those countries like they were being implemented in USSR or in America similarly, right? So independence from external control is an important aspect. So this is correct. Organized government, of course, this is correct, nothing to worry about here. The next option says a politically organized people of a definite territory possessing an authority to govern them. Now just look at this first aspect, authority to govern them. It is not talking about independence from external control. You just have an authority to govern yourself, but still you could be implementing the orders of a foreign government, just was the case in colonialism, right? The colonial powers, they had colonies. So India was also a colony. When British Raj was there, India was not an independent country. India was not a country. It was a colony. So authority, it had the authority to govern itself. The Swaraj and the Purna Swaraj aspect you can think about, right? Swaraj is having the authority to govern yourself, but Purna Swaraj means complete independence, which is the first option, the first statement, alpha, independent of external control. So here we have Swaraj, but we don't have Purna Swaraj. So this is evidence that some people or a piece of land having authority to govern itself, people having authority to govern themselves, may not be a country. So this option is erroneous from this angle. We can eliminate it. No need to think about the other aspects. One more thing, if you look at maintain law and order, protect natural rights, and safeguard their means of sustenance, these are like, UPSC is trying to go over the board to explain what is the meaning of the term state. In the beginning itself, I told you definition has to be clear, unambiguous, crisp. This definition is certainly not crisp. UPSC is just trying to fill words. It is trying to over-explain basically. And normally by experience, I've seen that whenever these kind of questions are there, which want you to identify definitions of some particular things, these kind of open-ended or excessively explained options are normally not the answer, right? This is out of experience, I'm telling you. So this is also casual kind of writing. If you look at the first option, it is certainly not casual. Very clearly it is giving permanently occupying, independent of control, external control, and organized government. Very clearly it is giving you three elements. But here you have like safeguarding their means of sustenance also. This is like a bit casual compared to the first one. So normally these kind of options are not the answer. But I've also told you the formal reason, the Swaraj and the Purna Swaraj aspect, the sovereignty aspect basically. So Bravo will not be the answer. Charlie, a number of persons who have been living in a definite territory for a very long time, right? Does the amount of time a person or a group of people living on a territory make the territory a country? No, because you have these refugee camps, refugees, right? They are living for years and years, even decades, centuries, right? But still, they cannot claim that piece of land as a country, right? So clearly a problem here, eliminate. Delta option says a society permanently living in a definite territory. Okay, permanently living. This word permanent, it actually should raise eyebrows. This is an ambiguous word. Permanently living in a definite territory with a central authority, an executive responsible to the central authority, okay, this is the bureaucracy, and an independent judiciary. Do we have countries that do not have independent judiciary? Look at the case of Pakistan. The Pakistan's judiciary is not independent of its army, right? Its army has a huge role in how justice is delivered in the country. So, but Pakistan is still a formal recognized country. It's even a member of the United Nations. So, Delta option also is a problematic option. So, the best option that we are left with, the option with the least amount of problem. Alpha also has problem because of this permanently occupying thing. But compared to this problem, the problems in the B, C, and D options are more grave. So, the least problem is there in alpha option. So, we'll go with this one. This is the best answer. Hi officers, yesterday I gave the last batch of questions related to prelims 2021. These were 7 questions in total and I just wanted to be done with prelims 2021 this week. So I gave all of them. From the coming week, from Monday onwards, we are going to start with prelims 2020. Whatever are your questions which you want me to take on priority, please send me those questions. I'll try to do them as soon as possible. Also, the 7 questions which we had yesterday of prelims 2021, 2 out of these cannot be done through the techniques which we have been discussing in this course. And the reason is simple, because the elimination techniques are not going to work in 100% cases. 10 to 20% cases will be there where we are going to get the wrong answer, but it is practically impossible to identify those questions where we are going to get the wrong answer, because the techniques are exactly the same, the situations are exactly the same. What we get the correct answer from, the same situations, the same techniques give us wrong answer in these 10 to 20% of the questions. So it is impossible to identify which these questions are, and therefore we always have the risk of getting 10 to 20% questions wrong from these techniques. But 70 to 80% questions will be correct, and this is a massive score. So out of the total 57 questions that we did, only 2 questions are there which cannot be done through elimination. 55 questions we have done through elimination through common sense, and this itself is a massive figure. If just 55 questions were done, we would get a passing score in prelims, right? So elimination really works if it is done effectively, if it is done efficiently with a cool, calm mind. Coming to the first question that I shared in the group yesterday, it read, consider the following statements. UNCDF, the full form is United Nations Capital Development Fund, and the Arbor Day Foundation have recently recognized Hyderabad as 2020 Tree City of the World. The second statement read, Hyderabad was selected for the recognition for a year following its commitment to grow and maintain urban forests. So it seems to be related to the first statement. The first statement is talking about Tree City of the World award, and promoting urban forestry is the reason why Hyderabad got a Tree City of the World award. So the two statements seem related, and if we come to the options, all of them are talking about both the statements. That means both the statements are important in marking the answer. Now, if we think about the first statement, the second statement, guys, is an explanation of the first statement, because it says Hyderabad got the award, and why it got the award, it is given in the second statement. Now, in the first statement, we have these two organizations, UNCDF and Arbor Day Foundation. Now, we have already seen that in marking the answer, we require both these statements, and the first statement is more factual than the second statement, so we focus on the first statement. So it says UNCDF, UN Capital Development Fund, right? So if we think about capital, we think of economy, we think of infrastructure, we think basically of GDP, etc. So capital development is in the context of economic growth, economic development. UNCDF, a body which is dedicated for development of capital, it being worried about urban forestry is unlikely. Problem number one. Problem number two, Arbor Day Foundation, right? It is saying UNCDF and Arbor Day Foundation have recognized Hyderabad. So this is a completely random organization, right? In fact, before this exam, before this question had appeared, we would never have even heard about what is Arbor Day Foundation. It's a completely random organization, and we have understood that if any statement is given, it gives random facts, and if that statement is important in marking the answer, that means that random fact is incorrect. If random fact is incorrect, statement 1 is incorrect, and the only option that says that statement 1 is not correct is the delta option. So statement second is not required at all, right? Because it's the only statement, the only option that talks about statement 1 being incorrect is delta. So even if statement 2 is correct or incorrect is immaterial. The answer to this question is delta. The next question was, consider the following statements in respect of the ICC World Test Championship. The finalists were decided by the number of matches they won. New Zealand was ranked ahead of England because it won more matches than England. Now, guys, this is a non-standard fact question, because your regular books are not going to help you in solving this question fully. So it's a non-standard fact question. If it is a non-standard fact question, then our regular approach of deep fact, random fact, etc., they apply. The first thing to solving a question through logic is to decide the scope of the question. What is the question dealing with? What is the scope, the limit of the question? The answer has to match the scope of the question. If the answer is too narrow or too wide, of course, if any option is too narrow or too wide, it will not be the answer. The answer has to match the scope of the question. So the question is about ICC World Test Championship. Actually, it does not categorically tell what sport are we talking about. We should not assume that we are simply talking about cricket, because even in the two statements, cricket is not being mentioned. So we can't assume that ICC means the International Cricket Council only, although it is a very popular body. So there are two approaches, and both of these approaches will give us the same answer. So if we say that we don't know which sport are we talking about, in the absence of that, we don't have a scope of the question, and then both of these statements, they become completely random, and neither one nor two. Random facts are not the answers, right? Whenever you have options like 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, and neither 1 nor 2, these options require you to be aware of both the statements to mark the answer. So completely random statements, both of them will be wrong. The answer will be delta. Even if you assume that ICC stands for International Cricket Council, and this question is actually about cricket, if you read the first statement, it says we are specifically talking about World Test Championship, right? World Test Championship. It's a non-standard issue. Not everybody is interested in World Test Championship. It is not talking about any World Cup or something which is a very prominent sporting event. There was another question in 2021 prelims which was about the Olympics, right? Olympics question was not a random fact or a defact question, because the things that were asked in that question, one statement talked about the theme of the Olympics and the other statement talked about some new sports that were included. That was not a random question, because you're expected to know about Olympics. Olympics is the greatest sporting event of the world. It happens once every 4 years, right? But this test championship by comparison certainly is not the greatest amongst the greatest sporting events of the world. So that is why it is non-standard, and if it is non-standard, randomly it has been asked, right? So whatever is asked about this World Test Championship, whether it is of cricket or anything else, both of the statements will be random. So this is another reason why it is delta, right? The answer neither one nor two. If we assume, let us go one step further. If we assume that it is talking about cricket only, if we read the first statement, it says the finalists were decided by the number of matches they won. Who will know this statement, right? The finalists, normally, if you apply logic, the finalists are not according to the number of matches they win. They are according to whoever wins in the semi-finals, right? Most sports have like that. So if it is not the case in ICC World Test Championship, then this also becomes a deep fact, right? And therefore it will be wrong. If you talk about the second statement, it says New Zealand was ranked ahead of England because it won more number of matches. Again, it is related to the first statement. If the first statement is incorrect, the second statement also gets incorrect. And otherwise also, whether New Zealand was ahead of England or whether England was ahead of New Zealand, who will know, right? Only very fanatic cricket fans, like very people highly interested in cricket, would know such things. Regular aspirant will not know such things. So it's a deep fact. Again, incorrect. So whatever way you think about the question, we cannot help but arrive at delta as the answer. The next question was, water can dissolve more substances than any other liquid because the first option said it is dipolar in nature. The next said it is a good conductor of heat. Next was it has high value of specific heat. And the last option said it is an oxide of hydrogen. Now, I told you, like, the way to solving the question is step number one, decide the nature of the question, whether it is a standard fact or a non-standard fact question, right? I personally am very weak in science. I really am. I have absolutely no idea about most things. So I will go with this question in the non-standard fact category, because if I read the question, it seems to be solvable. It is not asking about any technical thing. It is simply saying water can dissolve more substances. So I can understand the question statement. This gives me confidence. And if I read the options, they also are understandable, although I don't know the meaning of specific heat and oxide of hydrogen, right? I know oxide, dioxide, those kind of things I've heard, sulfur dioxide, pollutant, etc. I've heard carbon dioxide, but other than that, I really have no idea about this question. So I will take this question as non-standard fact and then approach. Once you decide whether a question is standard or non-standard, and if it is non-standard, then you decide the scope of the question. What is the scope of the question? The scope is given in the question statement. So this question statement is talking about water, right? Water can dissolve more substances than any other liquid. This is pretty wide, Any other liquid, every other liquid is included in this question, in the scope. And it says water can dissolve more substances. So maximum number of substances. Water is the liquid that dissolves maximum number of substances. And here also, these substances will certainly be of a wide range. It will not mean that only a particular category of substances are being talked about here, because the question statement is pretty wide. So if we have wide range of substances that are being dissolved in water, water can dissolve maximum number of different kinds of substances. Why will this happen? Okay, let me start with the delta option. We can start with the alpha option also, but alpha, I don't want to straight away explain you the answer why alpha seems to be more appropriate. So let me start with delta. It says it is an oxide of hydrogen. Now, this option is limiting the nature of water, the property of water, to being oxide of hydrogen. So it is basically saying that because water is an oxide of hydrogen, it can dissolve more substances than any other liquid. Now, this is problematic because it should not be this limit that is applied, because if a wide range of substances are to be dissolved, right? We saw here that wide range of substances are to be dissolved. That means if we have this kind of scale, if we have, let's see, like 0, so we have minus x to plus x. Okay, this is the range of the substances which water can dissolve. If we limit the property of water, that means only some particular kinds of substances will be dissolved. It will not be this entire range. It will not be this wide range of substances. So only those substances which dissolve well in oxides of hydrogen will dissolve in water, right? And also this property delta is not an innate specialty of water. It simply says that it is an oxide of hydrogen, that is why it dissolves more substances. So this means that not just water, any oxide of hydrogen, any liquid that's an oxide of hydrogen should do the same thing, because the stress here is on oxide of hydrogen and not on some innate property, unique property of water, right? So this will not be the answer. Similarly, if we see B and C, these two are limiting in the sense that they are talking about heat, water being good conductor of heat and water having high value of specific heat. The same logic, that is, it is limiting the nature of this water to dissolve substances, only those substances which require good conduction of heat or which require high value of specific heat will dissolve well. But we have seen that we have a wide range of substances that can dissolve. So we will also have substances which do not require good conduction of heat or do not require high value of specific heat. So what about those substances? So because B, C and D, all of these are limiting in some way, these most likely will not be the answer. If we look at alpha statement, it says water is dipolar in nature. So the first thing that it satisfies is it is talking about some unique property of water, some property which water intrinsically has, right? So water has got this dipolar nature. That is why it dissolves most substances, more substances than any other liquid. Seems fair. And also look at this word dipolar. Although I personally don't understand the meaning of the word dipolar, but it seems that it is talking about two different extremes of some range. Dipolar. I actually related it to the word bipolar. Something being bipolar means it can it can handle both poles. Basically, you can think of poles as two extremes of any range, and here we have this particular scale -x to +x. So dipolar means from -x to +x it will be able to handle the substances, and therefore it will dissolve those substances. So this was my reasoning of choosing alpha as the most appropriate answer in this question. The next question was, R2 Code of Practices constitutes a tool available for promoting the adoption of, the first option reads, environmentally responsible practices in electronics recycling industry. Okay. The second option reads, ecological management of wetlands of international importance under the Ramsar Convention. All right. The third reads, sustainable practices in the cultivation of agricultural crops in degraded lands. All right. And the last option reads, environmental impact assessment in the exploitation of natural resources. Fine. So we have these four options, and we want to see which one will deal with the R2 Code of Practices, or R2 Code of Practices will deal with which one of these options. Now the first step to solving any question is to decide the nature of the question, whether it is a standard fact or a non-standard fact. Most likely this is a non-standard fact question, because we are simply given R2 Code of Practices. We don't know what it is related to. Science, technology, environment, we don't know. We have to make a guess. We have to infer from the information given, right? So it's a non-standard fact question. And if we look at the scope of the question, once we identify a question is non-standard, we have to define its scope. So the scope is given in the question statement, and the scope will be this one, right? R2 Code of practices, it is some code, right? It is some guidelines basically, and the objective is to promote adoption of something. It wants to promote adoption of something. That means what? It is right now not a popular thing, right? It is right now not adopted widely. That is why it is an incentive of some sort or guideline of some sort, which will help, which will improve, which will increase the adoption of some particular thing out of these four options, right? So it is basically a puzzle that you need to solve. So what can be the answer to this question? If we look at the Bravo option. Let me not come to the right answer straight away again, because I don't just want to kill the suspense in the question. So let me start with Bravo. Bravo says ecological management of wetlands of international importance under Ramsar Convention. Will this need promotion? Will this need promotion through some form of guidelines, right? Or even environmental impact assessment in the exploitation of natural resources? Will this need promotion through some guidelines? No, because these are the responsibilities of the government. The government is already having guidelines how to do ecological management of wetlands under Ramsar Convention, or how to do EIA, right? These are formal things. Once a wetland is under Ramsar list, so Ramsar Convention itself mandates some things, or it gives some guidelines about how to ensure the conservation of that wetland, etc. That convention itself will give some guidelines, and the government also will have their own way of dealing with conservation issues, ecological management. So there will be nothing external that will be needed for promoting these things. It will be intrinsic, right? It will come from within, because it is a formal thing. It's a formal thing by the government. So Bravo will not be the answer. Delta will not be the answer. If we look at sustainable practices in the cultivation of agricultural crops in degraded lands, guys, in degraded lands, the land is already degraded. What will you do? To have sustainable agriculture in these lands, agriculture cannot happen, right? Because if you want to have sustainable agriculture, the land itself must first support the agriculture, and just so that agriculture does not destroy the land, will we have sustainable practices. But if the land itself is already destroyed, there is no sustainability question, because agriculture itself will be very difficult in these lands. So this question is unrelated. This option is unrelated to the question, and we are left with alpha. Alpha is the most appropriate answer. And if you read it also, it seems to be matching the question. It says environmentally responsible practices in electronics recycling industry. So it feels that electronics recycling industry is not following environmentally sound policies. To promote that, we have this R2 Code of Practices. Surely this can be the answer, right? Because intrinsically, unlike Bravo and Delta option, where the government was doing it formally, and it will already have its own rules and guidelines from the international conventions, in alpha option there is no intrinsic push to have environment sustainability. So external incentives can be there, and therefore the best answer to this question will be alpha only. The next question was, with reference to water credit, consider the following statements. It puts microfinance tools to work in the water and sanitation sector. All right. The second statement reads, it's a global initiative launched under the aegis of the WHO and the World Bank. All right. And the last statement was it aims to enable poor people to meet their water needs without depending on subsidies. Fine. If you see the options, we have 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 1 and 3, and 1, 2 and 3. So if you look at this question, out of the blue, this thing has been given, water credit, right? If it is out of the blue, it's random. If it is random, it's a non-standard fact question. If it is a non-standard fact question, you have to decide the scope of the question. And scope we get from the question statement itself, what is given in the question. And here, except for the name water credit, we are not given anything else. So water, you know what it means. Credit, again, you know what it means. Water credit, maybe some finance, some loans, something regarding the water sector, something in the water field, right? So if we look at the second statement, it says it's a global initiative. Just by the name water credit, can you say it's a global initiative? We can't, right? It's a random fact. Also, this first part is a random fact, and the second part, is it WHO or World Bank or any other organization? Again, we don't know. These also are random facts. So this statement is important in marking the answer because 3 out of 4 options have got the second statement. In fact, all the options have got all of these statements in 3 out of, in total, like we have all of these statements in 3 out of 4 options. So every statement is important. You can just pick any statement and think about it. And of course, if you are to choose between factual versus conceptual statements, go for the factual statements because these have a higher chance of being incorrect because of this deep fact, random fact issue, right? So because of these problems, the second statement cannot be correct, and if the second statement is not correct, we automatically arrive at the answer, which is Charlie, 1 and 3 only. Next, we come to the questions where the elimination techniques which we have been discussing have not worked. The first of these questions read, consider the following: bacteria, fungi, virus. Which of the above can be cultured in artificial or synthetic medium? All right. So as I told you, I'm very poor in science. Most things I have absolutely no idea. The question read, the question seemed to be pretty simple, just like that water being dipolar question. So I approached, had this question been any technical, I would not have touched it. It would have become a standard fact question. I don't have knowledge, I'll not do it. But this question, it did not really ask anything very specific, at least on the face of it, it didn't seem to be asking for knowledge. So I approached this question. And how I did it was I thought about the 3 microorganisms that are being talked about: bacteria, fungi, and virus, right? On Earth, there would be thousands and thousands of species of these microorganisms, each of these. And all of those species are covered in the question. It is not talking about any particular variety of species of these 3 organisms. So all of the thousands and millions probably of species are covered, and the question is saying can be cultured, right? So it is asking for possibility, and also possibility in what kind of medium, artificial or synthetic medium, right? So if you have artificial or synthetic medium, basically these are the custom made, tailored medium, right? Anything being artificial or anything being synthetic or anything being manufactured for something, that means you can customize it to your needs. You have full control over what you want to get. So if you want to culture any of these organisms, right, even one species out of the millions that are there perhaps of these, if you can get some custom built infrastructure and get these process them, whatever, maybe it can culture, right? Maybe it can get cultured in artificial synthetic medium. I don't even know what is the meaning of being cultured. So that is why I thought that it's a high possibility that you can get something, some infrastructure custom made, some machine custom made in some laboratory you can do, right? And even if one species of each of these 3 gets cultured, the question will be correct. So that is why I went for delta as the most appropriate answer, but it seems that delta is not the answer, at least according to the popular answer keys given by the various institutes. Delta is not the answer is alpha, right? So this is one question where elimination did not work. I don't know if it is a standard fact question, if it is given in your textbooks. If it is, please let me know in the mentorship, the free mentorship group, so that everybody can understand. If you know the page number of the NCERT, which class NCERT is this thing given, please share that as well. From my angle, I don't think it is given in the NCERT, and in this question, the approach that we have been taking all throughout in this course so far, it did not work out. So I already told you that in about 10 to 20% of the cases, elimination technique will not work, and it will be impossible for us to identify in which questions elimination technique will not work. So I always advise my students to mark every question where you have a rational reason. Okay, wherever you have a rational reason, please mark that question irrespective of whether that question is correct or incorrect. And wherever you don't have a rational reason, don't mark the question. Even if you eliminate like 2 choices out of 4, even then, if you don't have a rational reason for picking between the remaining 2 options, do not mark that question. Do not mark that any of the options. Another question that I got wrong through the elimination technique was this one, which read, in the context of India's preparation for climate smart agriculture, consider the following statements. The first one read, the climate smart village approach in India is part of a project led by the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security, CCAFS, an international research program. All right, I have no idea about this statement, right? But we can't say whether it is correct or false as of now. The second statement says the project of CCAFS is carried out under the CGIAR, Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, headquartered in France. Now this headquartered in France caught my attention, right? Because I've never heard of CGIAR. let alone understand, let alone know where it is headquartered. It's not a prominent organization, not in news, magazines, newspapers, etc., not in our books. So any random organization and its headquarter is asked. So this is a random fact, right? Whether it is wrong or correct, we'll look at later if this statement will be important in marking the answer. The third statement reads, the International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, the ICRISAT, in India is one of the CGIAR's research centers. All right. So if you recall that St. Francis question, St. Francis Xavier question, in that question also independently we did not know of the factual correctness of the three statements, but the interrelation between the statements helped us in arriving at the answer. Similarly, in this question we have these three statements and all of these three are related to each other, and in turn these are related to the question which talks about climate smart agriculture, which basically means sustainable agriculture. All right. If we come to the options, again we have these kind of options. So we have seen that whenever this is the kind of option, you have each of the statements given in 3 out of 4 options. That means each statement is important in marking the answer. So we have seen that headquartered in France is a problem. It's a random fact, and in 3 out of 4 options it is there. So if we negate this, we come to Charlie as the answer, but according to the popular answer keys, delta is the answer. So this was the second question which got wrong. Again, there was really no way we could identify that this was that 10 to 20% amongst the 10 to 20% of the questions where UPSC will get us wrong. So we had a rational reason for negating the second statement. I told you, wherever you have a rational reason, just mark the answer irrespective of whether it is correct or false. 10 to 20% questions will certainly go wrong, but 80 to 90% questions will be correct, and that itself is going to give you a huge margin. So that will be all, guys, in the 2021 prelims paper. From next week, we are going to start with 2020, and we may not do all the questions of each of the years from now on, because 2021 was important, so I did all the questions, but 2020 onwards, I'm going to do the most important questions so that we get hold of all the varieties of questions which have been asked, and then as time allows, we'll do the repetitive questions just for the sake of practice. Right? So if you have any questions which you want me to take on priority, do message me. I'll solve those questions and I'll do them in the channel as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Good luck. Morning, officers. So we finished with the prelims 2021 questions, and now we are going to do the remaining years. My objective is to do all the important questions from the year 2021 till 2011. So 2021, I did all the questions, and from 2020 onwards till 2011, all the important questions will be done on priority. So the first question that was asked yesterday was from prelims 2020. It read, consider the following statements. Aadhaar metadata cannot be stored for more than 3 months. Okay, it's a very, very specific statement talking about something called Aadhaar metadata. I don't know if it is different from the regular Aadhaar data or not. Sounds to be different metadata, otherwise why will it have a different name? And it cannot be stored for more than 3 months. Very specific duration is given. It cannot be stored for more than 3 months. So it basically means that only 3 months or less can the metadata be stored. So very, very highly factual statement. Highly factual statement, and we can call it as a deep fact. For sure, it's a deep fact, right? The second statement says, the state cannot enter into any contract with private corporations for sharing of Aadhaar data. So here we have Aadhaar data. In the first statement, we have Aadhaar metadata. So it may mean different things. If we analyze the second statement, this also is very factual. It talks about the state not being able to enter into any kind of contract with private corporations for sharing of Aadhaar data. So a specific type of body is mentioned, which is private corporations, and no contract with them whatsoever is allowed. Who will know this? Only specialized people will know this. So this also is a deep fact. The next statement says Aadhaar is mandatory for obtaining insurance products. Again, specific kind of product, and it is saying mandatory. Who will know, right? Insurance agents or people who are regulating the industry, right? Specialist information, deep fact. And if you look at the fourth statement, it says Aadhaar is mandatory for getting the benefits funded out of the CFI, Consolidated Fund of India. Again, a very factual statement, a deep fact, right? A deep fact or a random fact, whatever it is related to your syllabus also, CFI related to syllabus, so we can call it a random fact. So this is a typical question. It's a textbook case of what we call the priority principle. The priority principle basically says that, number one, if you have a conceptual statement, you can write this down also. If you have a conceptual statement versus a factual statement, the chances of factual statement being correct are less. That is, factual statements are generally wrong and conceptual statements are generally correct. Okay, so if you have to choose the answer between a conceptual statement and a factual statement and you are unaware of both the statements, go for the conceptual statement if the question is asking you to mark the correct option, the correct answer. The second principle is that if you have to choose between a general statement versus a highly specific factual statement, a general statement versus a specific statement, similar to the previous rule, the specific statement has got a high chance of being incorrect and the general statement has got a high chance of being correct. So just like these two rules are very similar. Basically, if you are to choose the right answer, if the question wants you to select the right option, correct option, conceptual statements have a higher likelihood of being correct compared to factual, and general statements have a higher likelihood of being correct compared to specific statements. Coming to this particular question, all of these 4 statements are very factual statements, they seem to be deep fact or random facts, but we have to pick amongst these statements because naturally the options, none of the options say none of the above. If we had an option called none of the above, then most likely that option we would have chosen because all of these are deep facts. But now that we don't have that option, we have to pick between these, so we have to select according to this principle that we have spoken about. So reject the most factual statement. Basically, it is easier to identify factual statements, right? So reject the factual or highly specific statements. Read the first statement. It says Aadhaar metadata cannot be stored for more than 3 months, right? Highly specific, highly factual. Compared to the second and the fourth statement, just read the second and the fourth statement. These are factual statement, but they are not data driven. They are not talking about very specific thing. These are more of general compared to the first and the third statement. These are more of conceptual or general in nature. The third statement also, just like the first statement, it is saying it is mandatory for obtaining insurance products. Very specific. It is talking about just like the 3 months the first statement was talking about. So these have a high chance of being incorrect. So you reject the first statement, you reject the third statement. If you remove the first statement and the third statement, the answer that is left is bravo, 2 and 4 only. Now in the first go, it is very difficult to mark 2 and 4 as correct because they are highly factual, they are deep facts. But I told you in one of the videos that if you are to select between 4 options the right answer, it is more difficult to select the right answer than to identify the 3 incorrect options, because even if there is just one small fault in an option, it cannot be the answer. And identifying faults is easier compared to identifying the right answer, because knowing the right answer, identifying the right answer requires a higher level of knowledge and confidence and surety compared to identifying the wrong answer, because something can be wrong in many ways, but it has to be correct. If it has to be correct, it has to be correct in that specific way only. So identifying the wrong options is comparatively easier, and therefore we went for that approach in this question and arrived at bravo as the answer. If you want, you can watch or play this video, this part once again to understand these concepts that we have spoken about. Another principle that we can infer in this situation is that if you are to choose between deep fact versus random facts, if there are 2 statements, you need to pick one is a deep fact, one is a random fact. Go for the random fact, because at least the random fact is related to your syllabus. Okay, how do we differentiate deep facts and random facts? Deep facts are those which will be known only to specialists. They may or may not relate to your syllabus, but random facts will necessarily relate to your syllabus. You'll not know them for sure because they are random, they've come just out of the blue, but they will relate to your syllabus. So if at all you have to choose between a specialist fact and a syllabus related random fact, go for marking the syllabus related random fact as correct and the deep fact, the specialist fact, as incorrect. In this question, the second statement was a random fact, because when this Aadhaar issue was there, the privacy concerns, right, massive, it was all the time in the newspapers. Judiciary also was intervening in this. So privacy issue was there. And the fourth statement talks about CFI, Consolidated Fund of India, is an important part of your syllabus that you have to study. So these are random facts, and the first and the third statements are deep facts. So we learned that random facts have a higher chance of being correct than deep facts. So just negate deep facts, the first and the third, and what is left is your answer. The next question was also from Prelims 2020. It read, with reference to the funds under Member of Parliament Local Area Development MPLAD scheme, which of the following statements are correct? So you have to identify the correct statements. The first statement reads, MPLAD's funds must be used to create durable assets like physical infrastructure for health, education, etc. Now, if you think about this statement, the name of the scheme is Member of Parliament Local Area Development Scheme, right? So the horizon of the scheme is wide, the scope of the scheme is wide. It is talking about development, and different things can be counted as development. So the first statement is something which we can expect. It is reasonable given the scope of the scheme. So durable assets certainly lead to development. So durable assets like physical infrastructure for education, health, etc. We don't see any problem in this statement. The second statement says a specified portion of each MP's fund must benefit SC/ST population. A specified portion. It is not saying 10%, 5%, 20%. Had that percentage been given, then it would have become a deep fact, because only the MP or the TC or people who are deeply involved with the implementation of the scheme would know. But it simply says a specified portion of each MP's fund must benefit SC/ST population. So this also we expect, because these are marginalized sections of the population. And yes, if the law mandates that a specified portion must be used for their upliftment, it will for sure be used. Otherwise, if it is simply left to the decision of the MP whether to use or not, then there's a chance that the MP might not use, and these people, they remain marginalized. So this is a reasonable statement. The third statement says MPLAD's funds are sanctioned on an annual basis, and the unused funds cannot be carried forward to the next year. Now this is a deep fact. It is talking about a regulation. These funds are sanctioned on an annual basis. Who knows? Because MPs are elected for a 5-year term. This is a scheme. The name of the scheme does not say whether the funds are released annually or one go itself. For 5 years itself, the funds are released. We don't know. It's a deep fact. And also whether the unused funds can be carried forward or cannot be carried forward. Do they exhaust, or do they, they don't exhaust? They just keep on accumulating. We don't know. So again, this is something which is a deep fact. So the statement is a deep fact, and deep facts are generally wrong. Right? Come to the last statement. The statement says district authority, that is district collector. Okay, district authority must inspect at least 10% of all works under implementation. Now, if this phrase at least were not there, if this statement had said the district authority must inspect 10% of all works under implementation, this statement would have become a highly factual, specialized statement. It will be a deep fact. But here it says at least 10%. So that means at minimum is 10% and maximum can be 100% of the works, right? So it has got that general versus factual thing that we discussed in the previous question, right? If a statement is general versus if it is too factual. So the general statement will be correct if it is conceptual versus if it is factual. The conceptual statement will be correct, right? If it is wide versus if it is narrow, the wide statement will be correct. So this at least 10% falls in the former category of general, conceptual, or wide, this category. So that is why the statement has got a higher chance of being correct. So the problem is with the third statement. If we look at the options, third is there in Bravo, we eliminate Bravo and Charlie, and 1 is okay, 2 is okay, 4 is okay. So what we are left with is delta, and this is the answer. Morning, officers. The first question read, in India, separation of judiciary from executive is enjoined by. The options include the preamble of the constitution, the DPSP, the 7th schedule, and it is a conventional practice. Now guys, this question was asked in prelims 2020, and I have already told you how to approach these kind of questions. In polity, we have mainly two kinds of questions. The first one will deal with political theory. For example, which of the following best deals with the meaning of the term liberty, or which of the following best explains the meaning of the term state, right? Political theory questions. And the second variety is constitution questions related to the constitution. From constitution, we have two another kinds of questions. The first variety will relate to broad questions like vision of the constitution or principles of the constitution, and the second variety will be the specific provisions of the constitution. Now, when it is the broad or principles or vision related questions, the answer will be amongst DPSP or preamble, because these are the only two parts of the constitution that deal with the broad areas, the vision, the principles. DPSP is slightly narrower than the preamble. If we compare between DPSP and preamble, like we have in this question, we have two different options. One talks about preamble, another talks about DPSP. So if we compare between DPSP and preamble is wider than DPSP. So this means that you will choose DPSP if the question is talking about some vision but in more specific terms, and you will choose preamble if the question is talking about some vision in broad terms. For example, if the question is about things like justice, fraternity, liberty, right, then preamble will be the answer because it is talking about very broad things. And if the question is about things like this particular question, separation of judiciary from executive, environmental conservation, respecting women, right, these kind of principle based things but some narrow principle is being talked about, then the answer will be DPSP. So what we learn from this question, as I have already told you in multiple previous videos also, that whenever you are solving a question, the first step number 1 is to decide whether it is a standard or a non-standard question. And there can be questions which can be both standard or non-standard. They can be solved either through knowledge or through logic. This question, like for example, can be solved through knowledge also, and like we have solved it through logic, that also can be done. So standard or non-standard is the first step. The second step is, if it is a non-standard question, you decide its scope. You decide its scope. Scope means whether it is wide or narrow, right? So once you are able to decide the scope of the question, you will know whether